From cherry to cup. The art and science of coffee processing. Ever wonder why some coffees burst with bright citrusy notes while others taste like ripe berries, chocolate, or even red wine? It's not just the origin or roast, it's what happens after the cherry is picked that makes all the difference. The magic lies in the processing methods, ancient traditions and cutting-edge innovations that transform a humble fruit into the complex, aromatic bean we all love. These hidden stages of fermentation, drying, and sorting are the unsung heroes of your morning brew, influencing everything from body and acidity to sweetness and aroma. Understanding them is like lifting the curtain on a whole new world of flavor. Behind every cup of coffee lies a rich and intricate journey that begins long before the beans are roasted and brewed. One of the most critical, and often overlooked, stages in that journey is post-harvest processing. How coffee is processed after harvest has a profound impact on its final taste, aroma, and overall quality. Whether it's the bright acidity of a washed coffee, the juicy sweetness of a natural process, or the wild complexity of anaerobic fermentation, each method brings something unique to the table. With increasing innovation and growing consumer demand for specialty flavors, producers are now pushing the boundaries of traditional processing. This guide explores the primary and emerging coffee processing techniques, from wet and dry methods to experimental fermentations, while also diving into post-harvest handling practices like drying, milling, sorting, and defect prevention. Understanding these steps deepens our appreciation for coffee's diversity and the craftsmanship involved at every stage. Coffee's journey from cherry to cup is a complex and fascinating one. The way coffee is processed after harvesting plays a critical role in determining its final flavor profile. Below is a comprehensive guide to the most significant coffee processing methods, innovative techniques, and essential post-harvest practices. 1. Washed, wet, processed. The washed process, also known as the wet method, is one of the most meticulous and labor-intensive coffee processing techniques. It is especially favored in regions where clean water is abundant and where producers prioritize clarity and acidity in flavor. In this method, ripe coffee cherries are first depulped to remove the outer skin and most of the mucilage surrounding the beans. The beans, still covered in a sticky layer of mucilage, are then placed in fermentation tanks, usually filled with water. Fermentation can last from 12 to 72 hours, depending on climate and altitude, and is carefully monitored to ensure that the mucilage breaks down naturally without over-fermentation. Afterward, the beans are thoroughly washed to remove all remaining mucilage. The clean beans are then dried, either under the sun on raised beds or patios or using mechanical dryers. This method typically results in a coffee that is clean, crisp, and vibrant, with high acidity and a well-defined flavor profile. It is widely used in Central and South America, as well as East African countries like Ethiopia and Kenya. 2. Natural, dry, processed. The natural process is the oldest and most traditional method of coffee processing. Often used in regions with limited water resources, such as Ethiopia, Yemen, and parts of Brazil, this method relies heavily on environmental conditions. In the natural process, coffee cherries are harvested and laid out to dry in the sun without removing the fruit. They are typically spread across raised beds or large patios and are turned regularly to ensure even drying and to prevent fermentation or mold growth. Drying the cherries can take 2 to 4 weeks, during which time the sugars and flavors in the fruit permeate the bean, creating a rich and fruity profile. Once the cherries are fully dried and resemble dark, shriveled husks, they are hulled to remove the outer layers and extract the beans inside. Natural processed coffees tend to have a heavier body, lower acidity, and bold, complex flavors with notes of dried fruit, berry, and chocolate. While this method is less predictable due to its reliance on weather, it is valued for the depth and uniqueness it brings to the cup. 3. Honey and pulped. Natural process. The honey and pulped natural methods represent a middle ground between the washed and natural processes. In both, the coffee cherry is depulped to remove the skin but retains some or all of the mucilage, also known as honey, on the beans during drying. Unlike washed coffee, there is no water fermentation or extensive washing involved. Instead, the beans are dried with varying levels of mucilage left intact, which directly impacts the final flavor and texture. Honey processing is particularly common in Central American countries like Costa Rica and Nicaragua. Producers often classify honey-processed coffee based on the amount of mucilage retained and the drying speed. Yellow honey, least mucilage and fastest drying. Red honey, moderate mucilage. And black honey, most mucilage and slowest drying. The pulp natural method, more common in Brazil, is a simpler version where mucilage is partially removed mechanically, and beans are dried directly afterward. These processes produce coffees that strike a balance between the fruity sweetness of natural coffees and the clean brightness of washed ones. They often have medium body, mild acidity, and caramel-like sweetness. 4. Anaerobic fermentation. Anaerobic fermentation is a relatively recent innovation in coffee processing that introduces a high degree of control and experimentation. In this method, whole cherries or depulped beans are placed in sealed, oxygen-free tanks where fermentation occurs without air. This closed environment alters the metabolic activity of the microorganisms involved in the fermentation process, leading to the development of unique and sometimes intense flavor compounds. Producers can control the temperature, pressure, and fermentation time within these tanks, resulting in consistent and replicable flavor profiles. Anaerobic processed coffees often showcase vibrant acidity, wine-like complexity, and a syrupy body. They may also exhibit unexpected flavors such as spices, floral notes, or tropical fruits. While this method requires careful monitoring and precision, its ability to produce standout coffees has made it popular among specialty coffee producers and experimental farms. 5. Carbonic maceration. Inspired by the wine industry's approach to grape fermentation, carbonic maceration in coffee involves fermenting whole cherries in a pressurized, carbon dioxide-rich environment. The cherries are placed in sealed stainless steel tanks, and carbon dioxide is introduced to displace oxygen. This pressurized environment initiates intracellular fermentation, meaning the chemical transformation happens within the intact cherries. This method intensifies fruity, floral, and exotic notes and can yield highly aromatic and complex coffees with smooth acidity and silky texture. Flavors of bubblegum, tropical fruit, red wine, and tea like florals are not uncommon. Carbonic maceration is labor-intensive, and the process must be carefully managed to avoid over-fermentation or spoilage, but when done right, it results in some of the most unique and desirable cups in the specialty coffee world. 6. Innovations in coffee processing. Coffee producers seek to differentiate their products and respond to changing climate and market demands. Innovative processing methods are emerging worldwide. Some farms are now experimenting with enzyme-enhanced fermentation, where specific enzymes are added to target mucilage breakdown or flavor enhancement. Controlled fermentation using selected strains of yeast and bacteria allows producers to create specific, desirable flavor profiles with greater consistency. Other innovations include thermal shock, alternating between hot and cold water to affect microbial activity, freeze-dried fermentation, and UV light exposure to influence fermentation. Technology is also playing a role, with smart monitoring systems, AI-assisted quality control, and hybrid solar mechanical dryers reducing post-harvest losses and ensuring optimal drying conditions. These innovations not only elevate quality but also empower producers to create signature flavor experiences. 7. Post-harvest defects and how they occur. Even with careful processing, defects can occur post-harvest, impacting the flavor, appearance, and marketability of coffee. Common defects include over-fermentation, which leads to sour, vinegar-like flavors, usually from extended or uncontrolled fermentation. Mold and mildew, which result in musty or earthy-off flavors and are typically caused by slow or uneven drying in humid conditions. Sour beans, often stemming from overripe or damaged cherries that have started fermenting prematurely. Black or dark beans, which indicate cherries that died on the tree or were harvested too late. Insect damage, which creates small holes and can invite mold or bacteria. Faded or discolored beans, often a result of excessive sun exposure or poor storage. Avoiding these defects requires vigilance in cherry selection, strict hygiene, proper drying, and monitoring of fermentation times and temperatures. 8. Drying beds and fermentation tanks. Drying and fermentation infrastructure is a key factor in coffee quality. Raised drying beds, also called African beds, allow air to circulate above and below the beans, promoting even drying and reducing the risk of mold. They are ideal for high-quality coffees, especially in humid environments, as they allow producers to manage drying speed and protect beans from rain or excessive heat with covers. Fermentation tanks can be made from concrete, plastic, ceramic, or stainless steel. Their shape, insulation, and cleanliness all affect the fermentation outcome. Tanks must be thoroughly cleaned between batches to prevent contamination. Some advanced tanks are fitted with valves, thermometers, and timers to allow for precise control, especially in anaerobic processes. 9. Coffee milling and hulling. Once the coffee has been dried to the appropriate moisture content, typically 10–12%, it undergoes milling. This involves several steps. Hulling removes the parchment layer, from washed or honey coffee, or the dried husk, from natural coffee, using mechanical hullers. Polishing is an optional step where the thin silver skin on the beans is removed, usually for aesthetic purposes. However, this step may slightly impact flavor and is more common in commercial-grade coffees. The goal of milling is to prepare the green coffee beans for export or roasting. Proper calibration of the machines ensures that beans are not broken or damaged during the process. 10. Grading and sorting beans. After milling, coffee beans must be graded and sorted based on quality standards. This step is essential for determining market value and intended use. Grading typically considers bean size, density, moisture content, and defect count. Larger and denser beans, which mature more slowly at higher altitudes, are often associated with better flavor. Sorting can be done mechanically, through vibrating screens or density sorters, optically, using color sorting machines to detect and remove defective beans, or manually, handpicking by workers to ensure only the best beans remain. Coffee is often classified into grades such as SHG, strictly high-grown, A, B, or specialty, depending on origin-specific standards. This process ensures uniformity and helps roasters and buyers select the appropriate beans for their profiles. Respecting the craft behind every bean. Coffee processing is both an art and a science, requiring knowledge, precision, and adaptability. From the moment the cherry is picked to the final green bean ready for roasting, every step influences the flavor, texture, and character of the coffee we enjoy. Traditional methods like washed and natural processing have stood the test of time, while newer techniques such as anaerobic fermentation and carbonic maceration are reshaping the possibilities of flavor development. Innovations in drying, sorting, and defect management further elevate quality, helping producers distinguish their offerings in a competitive global market. As coffee drinkers, understanding these post-harvest processes allows us to better appreciate the hard work and creativity that farmers, processors, and producers invest in every batch. It reminds us that a great cup of coffee is not just a beverage, it's the result of careful decisions, skilled craftsmanship, and a deep respect for the bean's potential.